Welcome to Brew Kombucha. This is your guide on what to expect during first fermentation. So, you're waiting for your homebrewed kombucha to ferment. This is typically the most nerve-wracking time for most homebrewers, especially if you're new to the process. Only because waiting is probably the hardest part of this, and you start thinking of all the things that you could have done wrong to mess up the process. But the good thing is, as long as you take the proper steps to do this right, it's pretty much foolproof. Here are some of my brewing vessels at different stages of the first fermentation process. This vessel was just brewed maybe 20 minutes ago. This one's about 2 days old, and this one's about 7 days old. When you first put your SCOBY into your first fermentation vessel, it might sink or it might float. Both are totally okay. Oftentimes, it'll rise up to the top at some point during the fermentation process and conjoin with the new SCOBY that's starting to form. Around day 2 or 3, you might start to see some little white specks form across the surface of your brewing vessel. A lot of brewers mistake that for mold. Oftentimes, it's not mold. That's just your SCOBY trying to get information. I know it's gonna be tough, but for the first few days, I really recommend that you don't mess with your SCOBY vessel. Don't stir it around or agitate it. That is the critical time for your SCOBY to start forming. If you mess around with it too much, or if you shake the brewing vessel around, it might inhibit the SCOBY growth or cause the new formation to sink, which is totally okay. But if you're a new brewer and you're looking for that nice thick SCOBY to form, it might freak you out if it doesn't immediately form. And it might just be because you're messing around with it too much. Around day 4 or 5, you'll start to see a new SCOBY form across the top of your vessel. It'll take the shape of whatever vessel you're in. So if you're brewing in a square vessel, it'll be a square SCOBY. If it's a round vessel, it'll be a round SCOBY. It'll be white to light tan in color, and you might start to see some stringy yeasty bits. You might see some dregs of tea. If you didn't fully strain your tea, all of that is okay. Sometimes you might even see some little black specks that look trapped into your SCOBY. They'll oftentimes look like little poppy seeds, and that's usually okay. That typically happens if you didn't strain all the tea dregs out of your brew when you're adding it to your brewing vessel, but it's totally fine if some bits of tea end up being in the liquid or trapped into your SCOBY. Sometimes I'll have a really active SCOBY, and my SCOBY will actually try to push out of the brewing vessel. That's totally fine and totally normal. If that ever happens, you can just poke it back down. Kombucha ideally brews at around mid to high 70s, but it can ferment just fine between 65 and 85 degrees. You can monitor the average room temperature really easily using these really affordable stick-on temperature strips. The cooler it is, the longer it'll take to go through its first fermentation process. So conversely, the warmer it is, the faster it'll acidify. So my brews typically take around 7 to 10 days to go through a successful first fermentation. And over the course of that time, the tea will lighten in color. The biggest fear that a lot of homebrewers have during this process is mold. And honestly, mold is pretty unlikely, but if you're worried about it, I have a whole other video dedicated to mold, so go ahead and check that out. So in the meantime, don't stress out too much about your brew. What it needs most right now is time. The less you futz around with it, the more it can do its thing. So to find out when your brew is done and ready to bottle, be sure to check out the next video in my series. And for more information, you can always go to ubrewkombucha.com. Happy brewing! You can just poke it down. It's like the stupidest tip. Just poke your SCOBY back down.